Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Gilda Evans, bringing you the Autism Resource Podcast. This podcast and the ARP website are your one stop knowledge and resource space for autism and much more. I'm very pleased to have Theresa Inman join me as my guest today. Theresa is a board certified behavior analyst, infant toddler developmental specialist, and parent coach with over a decade of experience supporting neurodivergent children and their families. She is the author of the book Pathways to Early Communication. As host of the Parenting on the Spectrum podcast, Theresa shares practical, compassionate strategies rooted in ABA, play-based learning, and mindful parenting to help families thrive. Welcome, Theresa, and thank you so much for joining me today to discuss the work that you do.
Awesome, Gilda. Thank you so much for having me. I thank you for the work that you do for parents.
I
I appreciate
appreciate that. I really do. So, to get us going, tell me what inspired your journey into behavior analysis and parent coaching, and how has your approach evolved over the years?
Actually, I started out in juvenile justice. So having two boys, I thought if I could learn anything to keep them out of the juvenile justice system, that's what I was going to do. And while in juvenile justice, which I actually was in for years, I actually started out volunteering when I was in college. And I found it was very fulfilling. However, the recidivism rate was so high, and every time I saw that one of the young men who I just poured my heart into, and I thought I did everything and could and said everything that I could say, sprinkled all the magic dust and all the things, and then we check and they're back in again. And I thought, oh my gosh. So it felt like somebody was kicking me in my gut every single time I saw a name appear. And I stopped checking because I thought, I'm not going to keep doing this to myself. But then it's still, I just felt like maybe it wasn't the place for me because I didn't feel like I was making a great enough impact. So while working at a maximum security facility for boys in Florida, my supervisor, I worked in the school part of it. And the principal mentioned that I should be on an ABA track. And I thought, I don't know what that is, but I'll look into it anyway. And I did. While working with my first supervisor, Lori, we went to a family's home and there was a young autistic man. He was 7, 5. We were toilet training. We were working on toilet training. Within minutes, he was using the toilet. A child whose parents had been so frustrated, who has never sat on the toilet before. And he was in there. We used popcorn as a reward. And I thought, oh my, could it really be that easy? Caveat, I'm not really big on using food as a reward unless it's absolutely necessary. And when it is, I prefer something like popcorn. Yeah, so he was using the toilet, and I was like, oh my gosh, could it really be that easy to make a difference in somebody's life, to improve somebody's life? And yeah, so that was the springboard into it.
Now, you often talk about the power of play in learning. Can you share how play-based strategies support communication and development in young children?
Oh my goodness, play is so powerful. It's a way to teach children without them even realizing that they're learning. A lot of parents, they call me the child whisperer. I'll just share a story. I walked in one day working with a 2-year-old, and this was my first meeting with him. He was on the floor. I got on the floor and he was lining things up. So I was lining things up with him, and he kept looking over at a helium-filled balloon. And I thought, okay, let's just try this balloon. So I pulled it down and I said, slowly down. And then I let it up and said, up. And he said, up. And his mom was like, oh my gosh, that was the first word he'd ever said. So that's what excites me, right? So when we're playing, they don't know. We use play and repetition and just make it fun. Even with him lining up things, he'd line up everything, whether it be shoes or cars or whatever. And parents were like, oh, it's getting because the shoes were all over the place. People are tripping over shoes and all of that. So I started lining shoes up with them, and they said, if we interrupt it, he has a tantrum. I said, there are ways. So let me just try something because, again, I can't guarantee that everything's going to work because every child is different. And we have to be mindful of that and respect that. So I decided to try to line up. I said, "Oh, let's just put this shoe here, this, and let's put that shoe there." And mom's jaw dropped because she's, "Oh my gosh, she's never even let us touch the shoes before." And before you knew it, we were putting shoes away where they belonged, and we found other things to line up because, it's challenging when shoes are lined up all over and people are looking for their shoes and on the way out.
Yeah, I can imagine that. Yes.
So, yeah, we've done so much. Another little young man I was working with, he actually had not said a word either. And we started playing peekaboo. And I'm going to say this to emphasize the power of the pause. So we're playing peekaboo, and of course, and we did peekaboo everywhere. Under tables, they had a high top table. So we were under the table playing peekaboo, and I'd put my head over the chair leg and peekaboo and move all around, whatever. And so after we'd done it maybe, I don't know, 20, 30 times, I said, Pika. And I waited and he said, boo. And again, everybody was just so excited because he had not used words before. I was there because he tantrumed and doctors wanted to, remember he's two, and the doctor talked to his parents about maybe diagnosing him with oppositional defiant disorder. I said, please don't ever, don't. I said, don't even contemplate that. Change your doctor if you have to. Do not contemplate that. And over a series of months, playing and interacting, he was discharged. So that was in my infant toddler role. He was discharged at 3, and mom called me and she says, "You have to come over." And I went over and he was like, "What do you want for lunch? I'll make you a hot dog." He had a little play kitchen. "And what do you want to drink?" And I could just cry. Because thinking of, had we not intervened when we did, what would his life be like today?
Yeah. And so the power of early intervention, the power of play, the power of just being there and relating to the child or whoever in a way that they can feel supported and in a way that they
Exactly.
can connect to.
Yes, and we always start with meeting the child where he or she is. The parents will tell me the goal is this. I said, yes, I get that the goal is this. Let's look at where your child is now, and then we will systematically put things in place to get to that goal. However, yes, children may say the thing within minutes. Some may take a little longer, and it just takes patience. It also takes a relaxed parent. And when parents are stressed, children don't learn as much because they become dysregulated because the parent's not regulated.
That certainly makes a lot of sense. Now, talking about meeting the child where they are, in your experience, what are some of the most common misconceptions about autism and ABA therapy, and how do you address them with the families that you serve?
Okay. A lot of people, especially when it comes to non-vocal children, they believe that they have an intellectual disability, and that is another kick to my gut because children at any stage can learn. Yes, there are limits to some, and I'll just say there's this one little girl when I was studying to be an ITDS. We were watching a video, and she had physical limitations. However, because she could move her head, they found a way to have her communicate by touching her head to a choice pad. There is Dr. Vayesh Sarathi, who I interviewed for my podcast. Her son has been diagnosed with autism and Down syndrome. He is nonvocal, and school said he's got an intellectual disability, and she refused to accept that. And I said, "Yay, mom." And let me tell you, her son Steve, he writes poetry. She's taught him higher level math and science because she's found a way to allow him to communicate. And that's what it is. We find children are having tantrums, children are dysregulated. And I say, listen, if you put me in the middle of China where I don't speak the language, cannot understand any of the characters, and I need to use the bathroom, I'm hungry, I'm tired, I will have a tantrum too. I may sit in the middle of the road to get somebody, anybody,
Can
you know?
anyone connect with me, please?
Yes. And
Yeah.
thank you for saying that, Gilda. It's all about connection. People, parents are like, oh, this and that. If we learn, once we connect with the child, once you connect with your child, life will be a lot easier. And that's why I think it's easy for me because I've learned how to connect with children. And honestly, it's easy as physically meeting them where they are, as well as engaging in what they're interested in. So if they're on the floor, like I said before, I'm on the floor. If they're rolling around, I'm doing the same. I'm letting them know what you're doing is fine. I'm validating what they do. And then they're more likely to come into my world and allow me to teach them once I've met them there. You said something about ABA. So
Yeah, various schools of thought. Some people are very pro, and some people are just say no, never. So address that, if you will, and the misconceptions associated that you have encountered in your experience.
oh my goodness. There are people who I've met who are like, ABA is torture, it's traumatic, it's this. There's so many negative connotations when people hear ABA. And I think original ABA, where there was a lot of compliance and placing demands on children and having them do the things and sitting for hours learning something, I get that. I'm not that person. I have a tantrum too. Somebody who I was training called me in one day and she was like, he won't sit still and he won't this and he won't that while we're trying to work with flashcards. And I went into the home to observe her. I said, first of all, he's 3 and you're working on flashcards, sitting at a table. I said, I'd have a tantrum too. So I said, listen, I'm not going to tell you to dispense of your flashcards because you feel comfortable. However, let's make it fun. So I took those flashcards and put them all around the room, put them under things, behind things. So we made it an activity, a fun activity. And then we had a race. Let's see who can get to the frog that's beside the lamp, or the frog that's under the table, or the dog that's whatever. And he was having fun and really engaged. And that was that. So again, it doesn't have to be that strict, rigid, forcing a child to do something. It's all about connection. And it's also about getting a sense, not forcing a child to do something. I always say we don't pull, we don't do this, we encourage, we guide, we support. And if the child says no, it's no. My granddaughter, who's 11 months old, when she shakes her head no, I say, okay, no is no. And I leave it alone because I want her to know that means no. And then that should be respected no matter what age a child is. I also do infant massage. And when I was studying to do, Laura, my coach, she listen, get permission. Yes, the child is 2 months old. Get permission before you touch that child. And the way we get permission is by wiggling our fingers in front of their faces, and if they seem calm and okay with that, then we proceed. If they look away, that's a no. Children have ways of communicating whether or not they want to interact with you. And however, if you make it fun and if you start with where they are, they're more likely to. But the second, things like dropping to the floor and running away, turning away, pulling away, that's saying, no, not right now. Maybe we can revisit that later. However, right now, it's a no.
I like that. Connection, respect, communication. I like that a lot. And speaking of communication, you're an author. You wrote a book called Pathways to Early Communication. So
Yes.
tell me a little bit about what you feel makes your book unique. And you're also a podcast host,
Yes.
Parenting on the Spectrum, which explores parenting challenges. So I'd love to also learn or hear about some of the key lessons you've learned from your guests on your podcast.
Okay, so first of all, the book, what makes it different? I use stories from my practice. I've changed all the names. However, it's just stories from how this child, what we did, and how the child responded, and how we became successful in teaching the goal that we set out to. And again, it's always if the child is old enough to let us know what their goals are. And honestly, a 3-year-old can tell you what they want to do. If they can, we teach them ways to communicate. And whether it's pictures or sign or whatever, we use those to, because if you have buy-in, and again, the buy-in is not just from the child, from the parent, it has to be from the child as well, right? So I just mentioned about when we talked about assent, it's just a bunch of stories we woven in together.
Stories are good because it's very relatable, right? People
Mhm.
and people who may have had similar experiences and can relate, and then not only possibly learn something about how somebody addressed that particular situation, but also you feel not so alone. Oh, look, this happens to other people too. It's not just me, right? Yeah.
Yes, yes. Just recently, I interviewed Gazette Haya, and I thought, "Oh, I am so compassionate and blah, 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 whatever." And we were talking about what to do when a child is dysregulated, right? And I was like, I usually ask them if they're okay. And she says, that's probably not the best approach. And I thought, oh, it's not, I'm not telling them they're okay because a lot of people will tell them they're okay. And I usually tell people I supervise, don't tell a child they're okay because you don't know what they're experiencing. How do you know they're okay? Did they tell you they're okay? So, well, they're not bleeding, they're not this, but whatever it was that happened, you don't know how it affected them. Even though it's not physical, it could have affected them in other ways. So it's just, okay, Gazette, what should I say? She says, just let them know that you're here and that they're safe. And I thought, oh, because sometimes we look for there has to be more to it than that, right? And it's always the simplest. In ABA, we call it parsimony, simplest first. So she mentioned that, and I thought, oh my goodness, yes. And then something else I mentioned, because I said, I think maybe classical music would be a great idea to have piping through because it has all these benefits, blah, blah, blah. She says, what if a child doesn't want to listen to classical music or respond to classical music? I like, but isn't it? There's a lot of science around what classical music does with the brain. She said, yeah, but again, everything's not for everyone. It's really opened my mind. Meeting all these experts in so many different areas just really opened my mind to so many different ways. And I was just like, we have to maintain a learner's mentality. Otherwise, we get stuck in old ABA land and don't come into the now where we allow children choice and just have them lead because we learn so much when children lead.
Absolutely. It's always important to be open to new things and learning and growing. And it's the old adage, right? The teacher learns from the student.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely, yeah. And I could just go on and on with so many stories. I mentioned Dr. Vaish Sarathi and her son. That was a big eye opener for me as well. Like I said, she's taught him and he shares. And he was actually interviewed with her, and it was just super awesome to see the interaction between her and her son.
So, what kind of practical advice would you give to parents who are feeling overwhelmed and unsure how to support their child's development? I think you're also developing an app for parents. Is that right?
Yes, I actually have developed an app. It can be found at app.parentingonthespectrum.co. And it steps them through. So it uses, yes, it does use ABA. There's also play and floor time. So there are a lot of different modalities that come together in helping parents. So if they're, okay, not sure which direction to go, it's a good place to start, right? And they can input information about their child and it will step them through what to do next. And because ABA can be costly and not everybody has insurance. So I just wanted something that's readily available for any parent who might feel they need support and don't know where to start.
So that, do you have any practical advice you can offer? Just maybe the most important one or two things that a parent who is feeling that overwhelm should keep in mind in terms of supporting their child.
First of all, take care of yourself. If we don't take care of ourselves, we're not presenting our best selves to our child, right? Either we were overwhelmed, tired, burnt out, and then it's difficult to teach a child when you are burnt out because they're also feeling the effects of what you're feeling. So they're going to be dysregulated and it'll be very difficult to teach them. So self-care is first. My friend Rosina will say, self-care is self-full. It's not selfish, it's self-full. And I was like, I love that. So really important self-care. It's the first thing. Like they say on the airplane, put your mask on first. And somebody said to me, isn't that selfish? I said, if you don't put your mask on first, everybody's going to die. Because then how are you going to be able to help somebody else if your mask isn't on, if you're passing out, what are you going to do? So
Yeah, very true.
really important. Yeah. So first take care of yourself, which leads to number two, because when you take care of yourself, you're more relaxed. When you're more relaxed, your child will be more relaxed and more ready to learn. Get to their level. Just take a few minutes. It doesn't take long. Just take a few minutes to be with and observe your child without a device, without any interruption, disruption. It's amazing what you learn about how your child learns, what interests them, because when you're focusing on what interests them, you use that thing to teach them. And then you're actually validating them, you're starting connection. And it all starts with connection. When you connect, there's nothing you can't do. Absolutely nothing. I remember working with a young man. I went to the house and mom was like, how do you get him to do all these things? I was like, what do you mean, how do I get him to do? She says, he's just having so much fun with you. And it was so easy to get him to put his pajamas on and to do all these things. And I said, as you can see, we're on the floor playing. And he was 4 years old, very vocal and just lots of fun. And she had never learned to play because as an only child, she didn't know how to play with her child. And her friends' children were all older than her child. So there was no reference point for her. So when you get there, you observe, it's amazing what you learn. For her, she had never seen it. And again, parents, you don't know what you don't know. There's never judgment coming from me because you don't know what you don't know. I'm here to help, I'm here to support, I'm here to guide, and to let you know that you are doing the best you can with what you know and what you have. Yeah, so that's the other thing I would say because connection is so powerful. Once we connect, the possibilities are endless. I just say, imagine the possibilities.
I like that. Now, you are located on the East Coast
Yes.
in the US. Is that primarily the people who you serve are in your local area? Do you reach out and connect with parents and serve parents in other areas as well? How do you work your practice?
Yeah, I actually serve parents globally because thanks to Zoom and Google Meets and all the others, it's become a lot easier. My travel partner and I, we've actually gone to the Caribbean to support families because the support there is very limited. And so we do that. And then also through my website at parentingonthespectrum.co, parents can find resources. We are constantly working on it to develop it to make it more user friendly. So at times you may log on and find, oh, wait, what's going on? So come back.
At this stage of the interview, I would love to ask, is there anything I haven't mentioned that you would like to mention? And what do you think is the most important takeaway for our listeners to have from our conversation?
I want to tell parents because so often I worked with parents or I've heard of parents who, because their child has a diagnosis, because their child behaves differently than other children, because they present differently, they don't take them out of the house. They're prisoners in their own home. The parents are prisoners and the children are prisoners because they don't go out because they're afraid of what people are going to say and what people are going to think. And I say, who cares? Your child has as much right to be out in the world as everybody else. There's nobody who has the market on, I get to go to the mall or whatever it is. The more you expose your child to different experiences, the more comfortable they're going to be experiencing life and the better it will be for you. And to the people who stand there, watch, just know that every parent is doing the best they can. It's not easy. They didn't choose an autistic child and they probably grieved having an autistic child because we all have this vision. And I just want parents to embrace your beautiful autistic child because let me tell you that when we're open and relaxed to what we have and where we are, it's amazing what that child will teach you. My friend Timothy Stutz always says, we don't always get the child that we want, we always get the child that we need. So think, what are the lessons that your child is here to teach you?
Thank you for those very kind and wise words, Theresa, and thank you for your time and for sharing your story with us today.
You are most welcome, Gilda, and thank you so much for this opportunity to allow me to share my heart with the world.
If you like what you hear, please subscribe to the podcast. You can find it on Apple iTunes, Amazon Music, Spotify, and other popular platforms. We'd appreciate you taking the time to leave us a review. You can also listen to the podcast on YouTube at ARP Social, where you'll find bonus content. And be sure to follow us on Facebook or Instagram to get up-to-date notifications about the latest news and episodes. If you would like more information on anything we've covered on the Autism Resource Podcast, visit us online at autismresourceproject.org/podcast. Be sure to check out our growing website often, since we are continually adding useful information and resources. I want to thank our listeners for spending part of their day with us. This is the Autism Resource Podcast, and I'm Gilda Evans, reminding you to take care of yourself and that special person in your life.